Okay.
All right, let's call the meeting to order at 6:08. Regular meeting number 39, according to the Greg Davis count. Appreciate you for that. Thank you. Nancy, you've got attendance, right?
Yes, I do.
All right, so that brings us to review and approve minutes from February 23rd. Comments, corrections on them from anybody?
So moved. I'll second. We approve the minutes.
I've got just some typos. Do you want those?
All right, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Lois, please.
In number 8, it should say separation of the cafe. In number 7, it should say commented on. These are just little tiny things.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
And in number 5, it should say contacted about. And then I think in number 2, we may want to say, probably Tskp talked about industrial, but it's not really an apt description. They were commercial properties really around the library, not industrial ones. Maybe we don't get to change his words, but
Did you
anybody
say
reading it wouldn't understand it.
Did you say in number 2?
Number 2, he talked about it being industrial properties around the library. And in fact, I think they're commercial mostly.
That one was in number 3.
Oh, thanks.
And then in number 2, the date for the open house at McMahon was 2/24/22, not 3/24/22.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes as corrected, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? Don't see anybody. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. New business committee reports. Let's see, Leah, anything on programming, space planning, and technology?
No report exactly, but we will be meeting next week. We'll settle on a date and time by the end of the week, and everyone will get that link. Thanks.
Any questions for Leah? Let's go to Maxine, outreach.
Yes. Hi, everyone. The External Outreach Subcommittee met yesterday, and we engaged in preliminary discussions regarding the development of a communication plan that advertises and communicates more information to the public. However, we decided that we're going to reconvene after the schematic design phase ends at the end of March, so that we can formalize the communication plan to include a timeline and action items.
Okay. Questions for Maxine? All right, let's go to Mr. Berman and owner rep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subcommittee met Saturday afternoon after the UConn women's game, and we had a very lengthy, long discussion. We had 7 responses to the request for proposal. 3 of them we decided did not answer the question and questions appropriately, and we're going back to the other 4 for some additional information. Without going through the prices given us, I would tell you that the prices are way above our budget. They range from double our budget to 4-5 times our budget. So we've gone back to them, asking them to delineate the scope of the project, and we'll reduce the scope down somewhat. Hopefully we'll get down closer to our existing budget. But our game plan now is that we will have responses.
Just to interrupt you for 1 second, Bob, we are going to go into executive session at the end of this meeting to discuss any of those particulars. So just keep that in mind, please.
Just going to give some dates. We're hoping to have everything out and back in time for the subcommittee to meet in early, either the end of this month or early April. And we hope to be able to bring a recommendation to the subcommittee on the 6th, or the full committee on April 6th. And then if the committee so decides, then we'll do some interviewing on April 27th. That concludes my report at this point.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Questions? As I said, we'll can go into a few more details about that in executive session. Okay, so Elizabeth, our director.
Thank you, Chair.
Update.
I wanted to start by formally introducing everybody to Allison Wilkos, who is on this call today. She's been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on staff in terms of a lot of the detail-oriented and organizer of consensus. So thank you, Allison. I wanted to let everybody know that budget talks start this Thursday with the town manager giving his formal presentation at 3:30 Park at 7 p.m. That will also be on Zoom. The open house at McMahon-Wittenberry, we received a lot of people coming through. We had about 30 people. And afterwards, we received on staff a lot of feedback and questions wanting to see the 3D models. So we do know that once those 3D models are ready to go after these next couple of rounds, we would love to have them on site. Allison Krasilak and I went to the University of Hartford for a tour of their libraries with their director, Elizabeth Dill, last Friday. We were specifically focused on looking at the technology layouts, and it was very interesting and we learned a lot. Maxine and I submitted a presentation proposal that was accepted for the Connecticut Library Association conference. We will be speaking with our colleagues from Southington and Coventry on a panel called How We Did It: 3 Recent Successful Building Referenda Campaigns. Last week's library newsletter featured the work of the Library Building Committee, and we specifically highlighted TSKP's project updates and the open house, as well as the start of the more formal lead conversations. We were with TSKP and the lead consultant, and there's a lot to think about, but there's a lot of great minds involved, and we're excited to share that information with our public moving forward. I also wanted to let everybody know that the library website and the town website is updated with all relevant information, including access to all of the building committee meeting YouTubes. So if anybody wants to go back and see anything, it's all there. We have formally started cleaning out our buildings, and we'll be opening late 1 day per month to really get a start on that. The next time will be Thursday, April 7th. We'll be opening at 1 o'clock. That is one of our late nights. We'll be advertising that accordingly. We also heard back from the Connecticut State Library, letting us know that we are good to go to be on the Bond Commission's agenda to have the $1 million state library grant approved. It was recommended that we reach out to Senators McCrory and Slapp and Representative Gibson to ask them to help get on the agenda, and that was all done as well. I wanted to let everybody know that the Friends are preparing to move out of Prosser as well, and they are in preliminary plans for a big blowout book sale, tentative date June 8th through 11th, and we'll make sure to keep everybody aware of that. June 8th also coincides with the week of summer reading opening, so we're hopeful to get a lot of people participating in summer reading, including every single member of the Library Building Committee, so thank you. We have also started communicating more deeply with Bloomfield Public Schools. We are hoping to be able to spend a lot more time in their facilities with their students and families when we're in their swing space, specifically the entire school year that's next school year. We're really excited for that, and more information to come as some of those details are worked out. I wanted to let everybody know that we're really thinking a lot about parking at both libraries, the history collections and the conference room that will be right next to the history collections room, and technology. I also wanted to let everybody know that I testified on behalf of the Connecticut State Library at the Appropriations Committee public hearing on February 17th. And I also testified about electronic book licensing before the Connecticut General Assembly's Planning and Development Committee on February 25th. These are two issues that directly affect library funding and the way we spend tax dollars. So that was a good thing. And the ebook licensing specifically looks like it's going to be very positive. And that is it. Thank you.
Questions for Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, when's the bond commission here meeting?
They are hopeful it's going to be in March. If it's not going to be in March, it's going to be in April. They said sometimes the first bond commission meeting of the session is canceled. So we should know that soon though.
Thank you.
Anyone else for Elizabeth? All right, thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, so we have a project update from Tskp. They let us know that they were not able to join us tonight. I want to thank them for the presentation, the models that they brought for our open house, which I think was a success. I know they heard a lot of comments, not only from building committee members, but the public. And they are working away on it. So I'm looking forward to what we see next from them. They also want to thank them for presenting to the Design Review Board last week. The Design Review Board had pretty much, I want to say, comments, good comments that we've heard from a number of people, a good summary. The only new ones that I want to report tonight, some of the comments, we will get a full report from the Design Review Board when they consolidate their own notes. I did recuse myself and the chair accepted that from me, so I really didn't participate in the review of the Prosser Library, and it was only Prosser Library because the Design Review Board has jurisdiction over the Bloomfield Center District and not other locations in town. So the couple of comments I just wanted to add, everybody's aware of. One was that we should be looking at a connection between the parking area on the Riley property to the mall, the mini mall to the west. So make it easy and get another connection along that spine so people can get over to the shopping plaza. And also a comment about exploring the possibility of any funds that might be available from the Army Corps of Engineers in relation to what we're doing with the bridge and so forth. So I thought those were very positive things for us. And I think I don't have anything else on the design front from Tskp at this moment. I suppose we could, anybody else had any comments appropriate to architectural work at this time? Or you can make them later, that's fine. Okay, so let's go to our construction manager. We've got Scott and Tom, and that's it, Scott and Tom from Downs.
Good evening, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So for project update, no budget changes from our last meeting 2 weeks ago. I'm sure there'll be some updates after this meeting though, and we'll input that accordingly. for pre-construction schedule development. So we're in March, that came quick. And for the end of this month, we're due for a schematic design review with drawings coming out from TSKP. So we're excited for that. And we're tracking right towards it. For the library grant contract status, as was discussed before, now you guys have a bond commission date, contract was signed and sent out, so that's great news. For critical items, Eco Charrette was held on February 24th. There'll be another one that will be scheduled once we get further into design. That went very well. We went through all the credits that the town can go after for the projects, for both projects, and those are currently under review by the engineers and the consultants on the team. For surveying, the surveying has been completed by Tarbox for both projects. So we have both of those surveys, including the wetland flagging at Prosser, which is great. For geotechnical consultant, Welty has provided a report on geotech for the McMahon Library. We're just awaiting the report for Prosser. And environmental consultant, they're on board and just waiting to see what their schedule is to get them into the buildings for an environmental report. Any questions?
Scott, I would like to just add one thing as it related to the schedule. We do have a 3-week period when we receive the schematic designs that we will start the schematic design estimate process from our end.
Thank you, Tom.
Questions? Questions for Scott or Tom?
I just wanted to point out, I found the date for the bond commission for both Downs and Nancy, and it's March 25.
Thank you. Oh, that's a good day. It's my dad's birthday.
All right, Scott and Tom, we thank you for that. Let's go to Nancy. She's got bills to pay.
Got some bills to pay. The first one is for TSKP, it's invoice 200-802-2, and it is for 60% completion of schematic design for Prosser, and it's $78,000.
We have a
I'll move
motion
Approval.
from Lois, seconded by
Seconded.
Mr. Berman. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed?
Okay.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Next,
Next, please.
220103 from TSKP Studio, and that is for 60% completion of schematic design for McMahon, and that's $22,500.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Berman, seconded by Lois. Thank you, Lois. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Chris, I can't see you. We lost Chris. Chris, can you say yay? You're muted. We lost Chris here. There we go.
There she is.
Chris, so all in favor, please raise your hand in favor of the motion to pay invoice. Anybody opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Delta Surveying Services. That's Jonathan Tarbox for invoice number 1 for McMahon Library. That's for the surveying services for $5,160.
Moved by Mr. Berman, seconded by Lois.
I'll second, but I have a question.
Sure.
Is that enough of a description of the work?
He does reference a purchase, or I thought he did. We do have a purchase order that has the description and ties in his written proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
And then there's one that I just received today, so I emailed it out this afternoon. I apologize for the late receipt, but it's for Clarence Welty Associates. And it's invoice 156-18, and it's for the geotechnical studies for $18,000.
We have a motion
So moved.
by Bob Berman, seconded by Lois. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments on the Welty bill? All right, all in favor, please raise your hands. Anybody opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Motion passes. Nancy? We also have, you need to go forward with registering
That is-
for lead.
That's right. We have to register, and I think that's is it $15,000
No, it's $1,500 per project.
per project? So, and at this point, we're going to do both or just one?
We are going to do both.
Okay, so it would be a total of $3,000, giving authorization to have us make that purchase to register for lead projects and pay for that $3,000 upon registration.
So moved.
Moved by Lois, seconded by Bob Berman. Any discussion on that? That's as directed by our lead consultant. All right, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. That passes. Anything else, Nancy?
No,
All right, thank you. All right, future meetings, we've got April 23rd is our next meeting, and then the next one should say, I'm sorry, March 23rd is our next one.
fix it.
And that should be followed by April 6th. There's a duplication there. So please let us know if you cannot make a meeting in advance. As we can tell, we're tight getting a quorum. So hopefully the mayor is going to assign a couple more people to our committee. Comments from the committee? I don't see any hands up.
Greg and Lois have their hands up.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Lois.
I just wanted to say that I very much enjoyed the lead charrette. I was impressed that everybody was on board and each person seemed to know what they had to do to move it forward. I'd never been part of anything like that before, and I was very impressed by the quality of all of the people and their interest in working together.
Yeah, it does involve a lot of people, doesn't it? A lot of different disciplines and really across the board, a lot of options. So hopefully soon we'll be sharing, what conclusions we've come to and where we're going to get our lead points from. Okay, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Greg.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have missed this, but I wanted to find out if there's an update from Bob with respect to the swing space. Anything that we need to know, any current and good information?
Nothing new from the last meeting.
All right, thank you.
Any other committee members? Okay, so we go to public comments. Nancy, we have members of the public with their hands up.
Yes. Sten Casperson. Go ahead, Sten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few items. First of all, a thank you to TSKP for the plot and the floor plans, as well as the three-dimensional models. Very much appreciated. I especially like the fact that the roofs come off and you can look inside. I do think that would be a big hit with kids, by the way, which I mentioned to the mayor at the time. With respect to the Prosser lower level and the parking, that plot plan, that floor plan did not allow me to see dimensions. How wide are the parking spots? How long are the parking spots? How much space is in between the left side and the right side? I continue to have concerns regarding the tightness of that. I think of various people trying to get in, get out. We're all familiar with the post office situation in Bloomfield, which is only on one side. Lord forbid that you go in there and try to get out without somebody who really knows what they're looking at all the time. And if there's a two-way drive between the two columns, the two rows of parking spots, that just muddles it up even more. With respect to the McMahon first floor, I mentioned before the separation of the kitchen and the cafe, that's in the minutes. I also took note that there's no access to the kitchenette when the flexible room is being used. I doubt that that's an oversight, but it's not a kitchenette and cafe if there's something going on in that flexible room. On that subject, sort of, there's a vending area in McMahon, but there's no vending area that I saw on the plot plans for Prosser. Maybe that was intentional, maybe not. An item for TSKP to put in their McMahon schematics next time. Where are the mechanicals? There's no evidence either on the roof or from the side that the mechanicals are in that plan. They certainly are, but it's not obvious. So you might bring that to their attention and ask them to put it on the next layouts and the schematic design that they put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Okay, we have Linda Pagani. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the committee for having the 3D model meeting in a place and open to the public. That was just very helpful, even though the designs that TSKP is showing are very detailed. It was just good to see them that way. And I was also glad that it was held at McMahon and not Prosser, just to get more people into that space. And I just continue, I did attend the design review board meeting, and I just continue to advocate for the exteriors of both buildings to look as modern as possible. For me, there's too much brick. I'm not sure why, for example, for Prosser, I know there's a very vocal contingent in the community about having it be brick clad. But really, there's only one other brick municipal building at that corner, Town Hall. So it's not like that the library is surrounded by all these brick buildings. I know based on the design review board for the hardware store, the design review board was quite insistent on that, I think, the brick. And right now, the only other brick building is the beautiful house in the center that unfortunately now is abutted by the apartment projects that are just encroaching on everything. So yes, so I just continue to advocate for both those things, that there's less brick, and that they are both as modern looking as possible, so that these can just stand the test of time, and not just in this present day, but for the future of our town, the younger people. So that's it. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Okay. No one else.
All right. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for your comments and attendance. I really appreciate hearing from people outside the committee. All right, so we, do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss owner's project management services?
So moved with the committee with Nancy, and do we want the ad hoc members in there too, Mark?
Absolutely.
Plus our ad hoc members and the deputy mayor.
We have a second? Thank you, Lois. All right, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands.
Great. And I would ask the people in the public to exit the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Any objections to going into executive session? All right, the motion passes.
There's still a few people.
Yeah, a few people have to sign out.
Mr. Haviland, could you remove yourself, please? And then there's a caller. The caller could remove themselves. No one here is it called in, right? I can remove them.
Yeah, now you got to play sergeant at arms. Remove them from.
I'm sorry. Here I go. And I am going to pause recording.
All right, we are out of executive session.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Berman, seconded by Lois. Thank you, Lois. All in favor, please say aye. Wave goodbye. Anybody opposed? All right. All right. Hey, thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
And effort, and we'll see you
2 weeks.
next meeting. Take care.
Bye, everybody.